Ever notice how the gritty 70s cop movies that would be canceled instantly today are the same ones people still call classics? Yeah, that's not an accident. The 70s did not care about being polite. These movies were loud, messy, and kind of reckless. Cops broke rules. Suspects got shoved around. Nobody stopped to give a speech about feelings. And honestly, that chaos is exactly why they still hit hard. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm saying they had nerve. Let's talk about it. Dirty Harry, 1971. Let's just say it. If Dirty Harry dropped today exactly as it was in 1971, the internet would explode before the end credits rolled. Harry Callahan is not here to build trust. He is not hosting town halls. He is not explaining policy. He's hunting a sniper who's terrorizing San Francisco, and he believes the system is too slow to handle it. That's the fuel of the entire movie, and the film doesn't pretend he's gentle about it. There's that infamous interrogation scene. Harry corners the suspect and pushes him for information in a way that would trigger endless debate today. The camera doesn't flinch. The script doesn't soften it. It dares you to ask, is this wrong or necessary? That's why it would be canceled, because modern audiences expect commentary. But they expect the film to guide them morally. Dirty Harry refuses. It plants you in a city that feels tense and dangerous, then hands you a cop who is equally dangerous. But here's why I think it still works. The movie is soaked in early 70s anxiety. Crime headlines were constant. Trust in government was low. People felt exposed. Harry isn't a fantasy superhero. He's the embodiment of that fear turning into anger. He's stubborn. He's blunt. He crosses lines. And the ending? It's not triumphant. It's bitter. Harry throws away his badge in frustration. That's not a victory lap. That's exhaustion. Today, studios would sand down his roughest edges, add scenes of self-doubt, add a partner who lectures him. Back then, they let him stand there in all his uncomfortable intensity, and that boldness is exactly why it would spark chaos now. French Connection, 1971. This movie does not care if you like its main character. Popeye Doyle is not polished. He's abrasive. He says things that would get clipped and shared online within minutes today. He treats suspects harshly. He pushes past boundaries. He's obsessed. And the film doesn't apologize for him. It also doesn't celebrate him. That's the nuance people forget. The famous car chase, one of the greatest ever filmed, feels like it barely survived production. It's messy. It's dangerous. It's shot with a kind of raw panic that makes modern CGI look too clean. But beyond the action, what really makes this movie volatile today is its portrait of obsession. Doyle is so locked into catching his target that everything else fades. Colleagues, bystanders, even basic caution. And the movie shows the cost of that obsession. Mistakes are made. Innocent people are endangered. The ending is abrupt and deeply unsatisfying on purpose. There is no big heroic bow. If this came out today, people would argue over whether it glorifies aggressive policing. I don't think it does. I think it exposes it. It shows how tunnel vision can twist a person until they barely recognize themselves. 70s films trusted audiences to see that complexity without neon signs pointing at the message. Now, the discourse would be immediate and loud. Back then, it won Best Picture. Different era, different tolerance for discomfort. Serpico, 1973. This one hits differently, because instead of a cop breaking rules, it's about a cop who refuses to. Frank Serpico joins the NYPD, idealistic and hopeful. And slowly, painfully, he realizes corruption isn't rare. It's routine. Bribes pass like casual greetings. Silence is expected. Honesty is suspicious. Al Pacino plays him like a man losing oxygen. He grows isolated, paranoid, frustrated. The more he insists on integrity, the more his fellow officers treat him like a traitor. That's the core tension. Not car chases, not shootouts. Isolation. If released today, this movie would ignite fierce debates. Some would call it anti-police. Others would call it essential. Because it doesn't frame corruption as a single villain problem. It suggests culture. And that's uncomfortable. The film doesn't glamorize Serpico's struggle. He doesn't get a grand speech at the end with swelling music. He survives. Barely. And the cost is heavy. Modern films often add hopeful notes, a promise of reform. That's a brighter tomorrow. This movie leaves you with reality. It says, doing the right thing inside a broken system can be lonely, and that truth still stings. Magnum Force, 1973. Now this is where things get wild, because suddenly Dirty Harry looks moderate. In Magnum Force, rogue cops start executing criminals, not arresting, not charging, executing. They justify it as efficiency, as justice sped up. That premise alone would detonate today. The film walks a dangerous line. It criticizes vigilantism, technically, but it also stages these scenes with high intensity. gunfire, tension, dramatic confrontations. So you're left asking, are we condemning this or enjoying it? That ambiguity would fuel non-stop online arguments. Harry Callahan becomes the voice of restraint here, which is ironic. And he believes in due process more than these younger officers do. That reversal is fascinating. It shows how extreme the situation becomes. The movie raises a terrifying idea. What happens when people in power decide the courtroom is optional? That question feels louder now than ever. And the film doesn't spoon-feed you the answer. It trusts you to process it. It doesn't hold your hand. Today's version would clarify the message in bold letters, add explicit condemnation, add reassurance. This one just throws you into the moral storm and lets you sit there. Risky, bold, absolutely combustible in today's climate. Across 110th Street, 1972. This film feels like the pavement is sweating. Set in Harlem, it dives straight into racial tension, economic frustration, and policing that feels strained on every level. Like there's no clean hero here, just men navigating pressure from every direction. Cops are tired, angry, sometimes openly biased. Criminals are desperate. The system feels tight and overheated. If this dropped now, every line of dialogue would be dissected in seconds. But here's the key. The film doesn't hide from discomfort. It doesn't pretend racism doesn't exist. It doesn't pretend police bias is imaginary. It shows people shaped by their environment, reacting badly at times, struggling constantly. The soundtrack alone sets the mood, heavy, reflective, almost mournful. This isn't glossy action, it's social tension simmering under everything, and that's why it would spark debate today. Because it doesn't offer neat answers. It doesn't resolve systemic problems in 2 hours. It shows the grind, the friction, to the ugly intersections of power and poverty. Modern films often aim for a careful balance. This one feels raw, not polished, not cautious, just honest in a way that would make today's comment sections light up instantly. The 7-Ups, 1973. You ever watch a cop movie and think, wow, nobody here is asking for permission? That's the 7-Ups. This isn't a shiny task force drama with press conferences and careful speeches. It's a group of hard-charging NYPD officers who specialize in big-time felons, the kind who could get 7 years or more. Hence the name. Sounds clean, sounds official. It's not. These guys operate in a gray zone so thick it might as well be smoke. They grab suspects off sidewalks, they apply pressure, they blur lines, and the movie doesn't stop to wink at you and say, don't worry, this is wrong. It just shows it, straight-faced. Roy Scheider plays Buddy Minucci like a man who only knows one speed. Forward, fast, no brakes. His world is the job. There's no cute subplot about his home life, no scene of him reflecting softly over coffee. It's all chase, push, move, go. And that car chase? Unreal. Not polished, not overly choreographed. It feels dangerous in a way modern action scenes rarely do. Cars whip through tight streets and highways like the camera operator might not make it home. There's a rawness to it. You can almost smell the exhaust. Now imagine this movie dropping today exactly as it is. Clips would flood social media within hours. Every rough arrest, every shouted insult, every moment where procedure is treated like a suggestion instead of a rule. Think pieces would stack up overnight. Or does this glorify aggressive policing? Is this nostalgia for unchecked authority? But here's my take. I don't think it glorifies anything. I think it shows obsession. These cops are addicted to the hunt. Freebie and the Bean, 1974. Okay, deep breath. This one is pure chaos energy. Freebie and the Bean is technically a buddy cop movie, but calling it that feels too neat. It's more like two detectives tearing through San Francisco, like the city is a playground and the rule book got tossed out the window. James Caan and Alan Arkin don't play polished heroes. They play loud, messy, impulsive men who argue mid-chase and wreck half a neighborhood in the process. And here's the wild part. The movie often plays that destruction for laughs. Cars flip, windows shatter, property gets flattened, and the tone says, isn't this fun? If this came out today in its exact form, well, people would lose their minds. Because the humor sits right on top of real damage. There's no long speech about accountability. No scene where a mayor scolds them about taxpayer money. The chaos is baked into the comedy, and that tonal mix is what would get it labeled instantly. But I kind of admire the boldness. The 70s were experimenting. Hollywood wasn't obsessed with keeping every character morally balanced. This movie swings big, sometimes too big. It mixes slapstick absurdity with real-world grit in a way that feels unpredictable. Freebie and Bean are not role models. They're impulsive. They're flawed. They push each other's buttons constantly, and the film doesn't pause to correct them. It just keeps moving. Modern studios would soften this. They'd add emotional backstory. They'd insert scenes showing regret. They'd clarify that the chaos is satire with a capital S. This film doesn't clarify anything. It just exists in its loud, reckless lane. Now, does every joke land perfectly today? No. Some moments would absolutely spark debate, but that's part of what makes it interesting. It reflects a time when Hollywood was less cautious and more willing to let characters be outrageous without a safety net. It's messy, it's explosive, it's borderline irresponsible in places. And that's exactly why, in the current climate, it would be trending for all the wrong reasons within minutes. Back then, it was just another risky swing in a decade that loved taking them. The Laughing Policeman, 1973. This one doesn't shout. It simmers. A mass shooting on a bus kicks the whole thing off. Random, brutal. No big villain monologue, just shock. The movie doesn't rush into action music or heroic slow motion. It sits in the aftermath. Confusion, grief, bureaucracy. Walter Matthau plays the lead detective, and he's not flashy. He's worn down, divorced, tired. He doesn't deliver punchy one-liners. He just keeps digging. Now imagine this tone landing today. No explosive action set pieces, no clear moral speech. Just a bleak investigation moving through a city that feels cold and detached. The film treats violence as ugly and systemic, not cinematic. And that's exactly what would stir debate, because the cops in this story are not inspirational figures. They're flawed, irritated, sometimes insensitive. They make mistakes. They follow leads that go nowhere. It feels procedural in a way that's almost uncomfortable. Modern crime movies often build toward big emotional payoffs. This one feels almost numb. The city doesn't care. The system barely reacts. It's just another case in a long line of cases. That detachment would confuse audiences today. People would ask, where's the catharsis? Where's the message? But that's the point. The film reflects a society that feels disconnected from its own tragedies. It shows law enforcement as human and imperfect, not mythic guardians. And when the truth finally comes out, it's not triumphant. It's grim, almost pointless feeling. Justice doesn't glow. It just happens. That kind of bleak realism? Studios would struggle to market it now. Back then, it was part of the conversation, quietly devastating, and absolutely too cold for modern comfort. Report to the Commissioner, 1975. This one doesn't explode. It tightens. From the first frame, there's this low, steady hum of paranoia. A young NYPD detective is assigned to locate a missing undercover officer. On paper, routine, another case file, another missing person. But the deeper he goes, the more the walls start to feel thin. And not in a haunted house way. In a someone is not telling the truth way. The streets are tense, sure. But the real pressure is inside the department. Meetings feel staged. Conversations feel edited. Superiors answer questions with half answers. Everyone seems to know just enough to avoid saying anything directly. It's a maze, and the maze is intentional. If this movie dropped today unchanged, people wouldn't just call it gritty. They'd call it a full-on indictment of institutional failure. Because that's exactly what it looks like. Leadership in this film isn't inspirational. It's political, calculated, self-protective. Decisions are made to protect reputations, not officers. That hits hard. The young detective at the center of it all isn't some unstoppable hero either. He's inexperienced. He's overwhelmed. You can see it in his face. He wants to do the right thing, but every step forward feels like stepping into deeper fog. And that's what makes the movie so unsettling. There's no loud dread. No nonstop gunfire, no dramatic rooftop standoffs every 10 minutes. Instead, there's quiet dread. The kind where a ringing phone feels ominous. The kind where a simple conversation in an office carries more tension than a car chase. Every new piece of information doesn't clarify things, it complicates them. The film doesn't trust authority. It questions it openly. It suggests that systems can become so tangled in ego and politics that truth becomes secondary. That alone would spark heated reactions today. People would argue whether it's fair, whether it's exaggerated, whether it's anti-police. But the movie isn't screaming. It's observing, and what I respect most is that it refuses to comfort you. There's no clean wrap-up, no triumphant press conference where everything is explained, and the good guys stand smiling under flashing cameras. The consequences are heavy. Death Wish, 1974. Okay, let's really be honest. If Death Wish dropped today exactly the way it did in 1974, it wouldn't just trend. It would detonate. Charles Bronson plays Paul Kersey, a quiet architect whose life is shattered by a brutal home invasion that leaves his family destroyed. The movie doesn't rush past the grief. It lingers. It shows the numbness, the shock, the hollow stare of a man who feels like the system failed him. And that's the spark. Kersey doesn't put on a costume. He doesn't make speeches. He doesn't join a task force. He just starts walking the streets at night, alone, quiet, waiting. He becomes bait. That's the part that would set social media on fire today. He actively looks for confrontation. He puts himself in danger on purpose. And when criminals approach him, he answers with a gun. The film does not stop every 5 minutes to explain whether this is good or bad. It just shows escalation. One encounter becomes another. Fear spreads. Word spreads. Crime appears to drop in certain neighborhoods. Newspapers in the film start calling him a hero. The public begins to romanticize him. And the police? They're embarrassed. They can't catch him. They can't publicly support him. But they also can't ignore that some citizens are cheering. That gray zone is explosive. Because the movie doesn't hold up a giant sign that says, "This is wrong," or "This is right." It leaves it murky. Some scenes feel empowering. Others feel disturbing. That tonal ambiguity is exactly what would trigger endless online debates today. Is the film endorsing vigilantism or quietly criticizing the fantasy of it? You can argue both ways. And that's what makes it powerful. It captures a very specific cultural moment. In the 70s, urban crime was a constant headline. Public confidence in institutions was shaky. People felt exposed, impatient, angry. Death Wish doesn't feel like propaganda. It feels like a snapshot of that frustration boiling over. But here's what often gets missed. The ending isn't triumphant. It's not fireworks and applause. It's uneasy. Jersey doesn't look healed. He doesn't look satisfied. If anything, he looks changed in a way that isn't entirely healthy. The violence doesn't restore his old life. It just creates a new identity built around confrontation. That's not a fairy tale ending. Modern studios would not leave it that open. They'd clarify the moral, add explicit consequences, add speeches, maybe add a courtroom scene spelling everything out. This film doesn't. It trusts the audience to wrestle with the discomfort, to sit in that moral fog and figure out what they think. And in today's climate, where every scene gets clipped and judged in seconds, that kind of ambiguity would dominate headlines for weeks. Love it or hate it, Death Wish would be the loudest argument of them all. So, yeah. The 70s didn't ask for permission. These movies weren't polite, balanced, or carefully filtered. They were messy, risky, and sometimes uncomfortable on purpose. And that's exactly why they still matter. Love them or hate them, they had nerve. The real question is, would Hollywood ever dare to make something this raw again?